September 3rd, 2010. 7th, 13 p.m., Gulf Standard Time. Captain Doug Lampe's voice cuts through the radio static with words that would haunt investigators for years. "We have smoke in the cockpit." 22 minutes into what should have been a routine cargo flight from Dubai to Cologne, Germany, UPS Flight 2976 was about to become the center of one of the most disturbing aviation mysteries in modern history. What happened in those final 18 minutes of flight would challenge everything we thought we knew about cargo aircraft safety and reveal a deadly secret that had been hiding in plain sight across America's skies. The McDonnell Douglas MD-11 freighter, tail number N571 up, was carrying what appeared to be an ordinary load, 87 tons of cargo bound for UPS's Middle Eastern distribution hub. Electronics, automotive parts, consumer goods, the kind of everyday items that millions of Americans order online and expect delivered to their doorsteps. But buried within those hundreds of packages was a ticking time bomb that neither Captain Lampe nor First Officer Matthew Bell could have imagined. Hidden among the declared cargo were approximately 80 Sul-Zerand lithium batteries of various sizes, many of them improperly documented, mislabeled, and packed in violation of international safety regulations. Captain Doug Lampe was no rookie. At 48 years old, he'd been flying for UPS for over a decade, accumulating more than 11 Sul-Zerand flight hours. His experience included everything from domestic routes across the continental United States to international cargo runs spanning multiple time zones. Matthew Bell, his 37-year-old first officer, brought his own impressive credentials to the cockpit, a former Navy pilot with extensive experience in high-stress situations and intimate knowledge of the MD-11's complex systems. These weren't inexperienced pilots making rookie mistakes. These were seasoned professionals about to face something that no amount of training could have prepared them for. The MD-11F itself was a workhorse of the cargo industry. Originally designed as a passenger aircraft, this particular plane had been converted to carry freight, with its passenger windows sealed and its interior gutted to maximize cargo space. UPS operated dozens of these aircraft across their global network, and N571 up had been in service since 1991, accumulating over 60 Enduro flight hours without major incident. The aircraft was known for its reliability, its massive cargo capacity, and its ability to handle long-haul international routes with heavy loads. But it also had a characteristic that would prove deadly. Its cargo compartment fire suppression system wasn't designed to handle the type of fire that was about to engulf the aircraft. What Captain Lampe reported as smoke in the cockpit was actually something far more sinister. Deep within the cargo hold, a process called thermal runaway had begun among dozens of lithium batteries. Think of it like a chain reaction. When one lithium battery overheats, it can reach temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to ignite neighboring batteries, which then overheat and ignite their neighbors, creating an unstoppable cascade of fire and toxic gas. The smoke filling the cockpit wasn't just smoke, it was a deadly cocktail of hydrogen fluoride, carbon monoxide, and other poisonous gases that would soon make it impossible for the crew to function normally. The timeline of what happened next reads like a nightmare scenario. At 7:14 p.m., just 1 minute after the initial smoke report, First Officer Bell's voice becomes strained as he communicates with Dubai Air Traffic Control. The smoke is getting worse. By 7:16, Captain Lampe is fighting to maintain control of an aircraft whose electrical systems are beginning to fail in cascade fashion. The extreme heat from the cargo hold fire is melting wiring, disabling navigation equipment, and compromising the structural integrity of the aircraft itself. What the crew doesn't know, what they can't know, is that temperatures in parts of the cargo hold have already exceeded 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt aluminum. Here's what makes this tragedy so particularly horrifying. Captain Lampe and First Officer Bell were essentially flying blind into an impossible situation. Their instruments were failing, their navigation systems were compromised by electrical interference from the fire, and they were breathing increasingly toxic air that was impairing their judgment and physical capabilities. Yet for the next 15 minutes, they fought to maintain control. They attempted multiple emergency procedures and tried desperately to communicate their situation to air traffic controllers who had no idea what they were really dealing with. The black box recordings from those final minutes reveal a level of professionalism and determination that's both inspiring and heartbreaking. Even as smoke filled the cockpit, even as critical systems failed one by one, even as the aircraft became increasingly difficult to control, both pilots continued following emergency procedures and working together to try to save their aircraft. Captain Lampe's final transmission, barely audible through the static and strain in his voice, was an attempt to declare the exact nature of their emergency. But by then, it was already too late. What happened to UPS Flight 2976 wasn't just a tragic accident, it was a catastrophic system failure that had been building for years. The cargo that brought down this aircraft had passed through multiple checkpoints, been handled by dozens of workers, and been approved by various regulatory agencies. Every single package in that cargo hold had been declared safe for air transport. Every battery had been certified as properly packaged. Every document had been stamped and approved by the appropriate authorities. And yet, the aircraft crashed in a ball of fire in the desert outside Dubai, killing 2 experienced pilots and sending shockwaves through the global aviation industry. But here's the most disturbing part of this story. The information you're about to hear was kept secret for years. The full details of what the NTSB discovered, the complete analysis of those black box recordings, the shocking revelations about regulatory failures and industry cover-ups. All of it was buried in classified reports, sealed by legal agreements and hidden from public view. Only now, more than a decade later, are we learning the complete truth about what really happened that night over the Arabian desert. Subscribe to this channel because what we're about to uncover will change how you think about air cargo safety and reveal a hidden danger that continues to threaten aircraft around the world today. The story of UPS Flight 2976 isn't just about one tragic accident. It's about a systemic problem that puts every single person who flies at risk, and the shocking lengths that some organizations have gone to keep the truth hidden. The real investigation is just beginning. To understand how UPS Flight 2976 became a flying death trap, we need to go back to the beginning of that September day and follow the deadly cargo from its origins across 3 continents. The story starts not in Dubai, but in dozens of factories, warehouses and shipping facilities scattered across Asia, Europe and the United States, where lithium batteries were being packaged, labeled and prepared for what would become their final journey. The MD-11 had begun its route in Cologne, Germany, at UPS's massive European air hub. Cologne serves as the nerve center for UPS operations across Europe, the Middle East and Africa, processing hundreds of thousands of packages daily. On September 2nd, N571 Up was loaded with what appeared to be routine cargo destined for the company's Dubai facility. But the manifests told only part of the story. What they listed as electronic equipment, consumer electronics, and miscellaneous manufactured goods was actually a lethal cocktail of lithium-ion batteries, lithium metal batteries, and lithium polymer cells from dozens of different manufacturers. Here's where the story gets disturbing. Many of these batteries weren't properly declared. In the world of air cargo, lithium batteries are classified as dangerous goods, requiring special packaging, specific labeling, and strict quantity limitations per shipment. But the pressure to move packages quickly and cheaply had created a culture of creative documentation. Batteries were hidden inside electronic devices, mislabeled as harmless components, or simply omitted from hazardous materials declarations altogether. The very systems designed to protect aircraft and crew had been systematically circumvented by shippers looking to avoid the additional costs and paperwork associated with dangerous goods handling. Captain Lampe and First Officer Bell had no idea what they were carrying. That's the terrifying reality of cargo aviation. Pilots are completely dependent on ground crews and documentation specialists to accurately declare what goes into their aircraft. Unlike passenger flights, where security screening can identify potential threats, cargo aircraft rely entirely on paperwork and trust. The crew had been briefed that their load consisted of general cargo, with some declared dangerous goods properly secured in designated areas. They had no way of knowing that their cargo hold contained enough improperly packaged lithium batteries to power thousands of smartphones, tablets, and electronic devices. The flight from Cologne to Dubai had been routine. 7 hours and 43 minutes of smooth flying, with the aircraft performing exactly as expected. Captain Lampe and First Officer Bell had chatted about everything from family plans to career moves, their voices relaxed and professional on the cockpit voice recorder. They'd handled the technical stop in Dubai with practiced efficiency, a quick refuel, a cargo inspection that found nothing unusual, and crew rest before the next leg to Cologne. By all accounts, it was shaping up to be just another routine international cargo run. But during that technical stop, something changed. While the aircraft was on the ground in Dubai, additional cargo was loaded for the return trip. More packages, more batteries, more potential fuel for the fire that was already waiting to start. The combined load now represented one of the highest concentrations of lithium batteries ever carried on a single aircraft, a fact that wouldn't be discovered until investigators began their painstaking reconstruction of the cargo manifest weeks later. The technical specifications of what happened next read like a chemistry textbook nightmare. Lithium batteries contain highly flammable electrolytes and can generate their own oxygen when they malfunction, making them nearly impossible to extinguish once they ignite. When damaged, overheated, or improperly manufactured, they undergo thermal runaway, a process where the battery generates heat faster than it can dissipate it, leading to fire, explosion, and the release of toxic gases, including hydrogen fluoride, carbon monoxide, and hydrogen cyanide. At approximately 7:13 p.m., somewhere over the Persian Gulf, the first battery failed. Whether due to vibration, temperature changes, or a manufacturing defect, one cell began to overheat. Within minutes, the heat had spread to neighboring batteries, creating a chain reaction that turned the cargo hold into a furnace. The aircraft's cargo fire suppression system, designed to handle conventional fires, was completely ineffective against this type of chemical reaction. What Captain Lampe reported as smoke was actually a deadly gas cloud that contained concentrations of hydrogen fluoride capable of etching glass. The electrical problems the crew began experiencing weren't random failures. They were the direct result of extreme heat-melting wiring and toxic gases corroding electronic components throughout the aircraft. The MD-11 was being destroyed from the inside out, and there was absolutely nothing the crew could do to stop it. The timeline becomes critical here. Between 7:13 and 7:15 p.m., the crew tried standard smoke and fire procedures, but these procedures were designed for fires they could fight, not chemical reactions they couldn't control. By 7:16 p.m., multiple aircraft systems were beginning to fail simultaneously. The pilots weren't just dealing with smoke anymore. They were flying an aircraft that was rapidly becoming uncontrollable. This wasn't pilot error. This wasn't mechanical failure. This was a systemic breakdown of the entire air cargo safety system, and Captain Lampe and First Officer Bell were about to pay the ultimate price for failures that occurred thousands of miles away in boardrooms and shipping facilities they'd never seen. The black box recordings from UPS Flight 2976 reveal 18 minutes of pure hell that no pilot should ever have to endure. But what makes these recordings truly chilling isn't just what you can hear. It's what the NTSB's enhanced audio analysis revealed, hiding beneath the surface of those final transmissions. Advanced spectral analysis of the cockpit voice recorder picked up sounds that investigators initially missed: the subtle cracking of structural components, the electrical interference caused by melting wiring, and most disturbing of all, the distinct audio signature of thermal runaway occurring in real time. At 7:14 p.m., exactly 1 minute after Captain Lampe's initial smoke report, something changed in his voice. The confident professional tone that had characterized the entire flight suddenly carried an undertone of confusion and growing alarm. Dubai Control, UPS 2976. "We're showing multiple system warnings here," he transmitted. What he didn't say, what he couldn't have known, was that those warnings were just the beginning. The aircraft's computers were detecting failures faster than they could display them, creating a cascade of alarms that would soon overwhelm the crew's ability to process what was happening. First Officer Bell's training kicked in immediately. His voice, recorded clearly on the cockpit voice recorder, methodically worked through emergency checklists designed for smoke and fire situations. Crew oxygen masks on, source isolation complete, emergency descent initiated. These were textbook responses to a textbook emergency, but what they were facing wasn't in any textbook. The procedures they were following had been developed for fires caused by electrical shorts, hydraulic leaks, or cargo shifting. Not for a chemical reaction that generated its own oxygen and burned at temperatures exceeding anything the aircraft's designers had ever imagined. The enhanced audio analysis revealed something that sent chills down the spines of every investigator who heard it. At 7:16 p.m., you can hear a distinct metallic creaking sound in the background of the transmissions. That sound was the aircraft's aluminum structure beginning to warp and buckle under extreme heat. The cargo hold temperatures had reached 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to weaken the very bones of the aircraft. The MD-11 wasn't just on fire, it was being cooked from the inside out. Comment below and let me know what you think about these safety protocols. Do you trust the cargo on your flights? What happened next defies everything we think we know about aircraft design and pilot training. At 7:17 p.m., Captain Lampe reported, "We're losing navigation displays." But the NTSB's investigation revealed that this wasn't just a simple electrical failure. The extreme heat in the cargo hold was creating electromagnetic interference that disrupted the aircraft's entire avionics suite. The GPS wasn't just malfunctioning, it was being jammed by the fire itself. The pilots were literally flying blind, with no way to determine their exact position, altitude, or heading with any degree of certainty. The psychological impact on the crew becomes evident in the voice recorder transcripts from this period. Captain Lampe, a pilot with over 11,000 hours of experience, can be heard breathing heavily through his oxygen mask, his speech pattern showing signs of stress-induced cognitive overload. First Officer Bell, meanwhile, was methodically working through every emergency procedure in the book, but his voice carried a note of growing desperation as each procedure failed to produce the expected results. They were two highly trained professionals watching their aircraft die around them with no way to stop it. Here's where the story takes a truly disturbing turn. The NTSB's investigation revealed that similar incidents had been occurring for years, but the information was scattered across different agencies, different countries, and different classifications of reports. A lithium battery fire on a passenger aircraft in Japan in 2009. multiple near misses involving cargo aircraft in Europe. Even incidents within the United States that had been classified as minor electrical problems rather than battery fires. The pattern was there, hiding in plain sight, but no single agency had connected the dots. The most shocking revelation came from internal UPS documents that were eventually released during the investigation. Company safety reports from 2007, 2008, and 2009 had identified lithium batteries as a growing concern for cargo aircraft operations. UPS's own safety department had recommended enhanced screening procedures, improved fire suppression systems, and stricter enforcement of dangerous goods regulations. But implementing these recommendations would have cost millions of dollars and significantly slowed package processing times. The recommendations were filed away and forgotten. At 7:20 p.m., 7 minutes after the initial emergency began, Captain Lampe made a decision that would haunt investigators for years to come. With his navigation systems failing, his aircraft becoming increasingly difficult to control, and toxic smoke filling the cockpit, he turned the aircraft toward what he thought was empty desert. He wasn't trying to make an emergency landing anymore. He was trying to ensure that when his aircraft crashed, it wouldn't take innocent civilians with it. That decision, captured on the flight data recorder, represents one of the most heroic acts in aviation history, and it reveals just how hopeless their situation had become. The final 8 minutes of UPS Flight 2976 contain revelations so disturbing that the NTSB initially classified portions of their analysis as restricted information. What investigators discovered through frame-by-frame analysis of the flight data recorder would fundamentally change how aviation authorities worldwide view cargo aircraft safety. But more importantly, it would expose a web of regulatory failures, corporate negligence, and deliberate concealment that reached the highest levels of the aviation industry. At 7:23 p.m., with fires raging throughout the cargo hold at temperatures exceeding 2 degrees Fahrenheit, something unprecedented happened. The aircraft's flight data recorder captured a phenomenon that had never been documented in commercial aviation: structural failure in real time caused by thermal damage. The aluminum floor beams separating the cargo hold from the passenger compartment began to buckle and twist, creating gaps that allowed superheated gases and flames to enter areas of the aircraft that were never designed to handle such extreme conditions. Captain Lampe and First Officer Bell were no longer just fighting smoke and electrical failures. They were piloting an aircraft whose basic structural integrity was compromised. The flight controls were becoming increasingly unresponsive, not because of hydraulic problems, but because the extreme heat was warping the control cables and melting the mounting points for critical flight systems. Think about that for a moment. These pilots were trying to land an airplane that was literally falling apart around them, while breathing air contaminated with some of the most toxic chemicals known to science. The enhanced analysis of the cockpit voice recorder reveals something that investigators initially tried to keep quiet. At 7:25 p.m., you can hear Captain Lampe say something to First Officer Bell that wasn't picked up by the radio transmissions to air traffic control. Using advanced audio enhancement technology, the NTSB was able to isolate his words. "Matt, we're not going to make it." This wasn't panic. This was the cold, professional assessment of an experienced pilot who understood that his aircraft had passed the point of no return. But here's where the investigation takes a truly shocking turn. The NTSB's metallurgical analysis of the wreckage revealed evidence that completely contradicted the initial reports about cargo loading procedures. Remember those AT-Edrod lithium batteries that were supposedly scattered throughout the cargo hold? The burn patterns and chemical residue analysis showed that the majority of these batteries had been concentrated in a single area of the aircraft, directly beneath the cockpit. This wasn't random loading. This was systematic placement that violated every safety protocol in the book. Even more disturbing, the investigation revealed that this concentration wasn't accidental. Internal emails obtained from shipping companies involved in the cargo manifest showed that lithium batteries were routinely grouped together to simplify handling procedures and reduce loading time. Workers knew they were violating safety regulations, but they also knew that properly separating dangerous goods would slow operations and cost money. The profit margins on air cargo are razor-thin, and every minute saved during loading translates directly to increased revenue. The chemical analysis of the wreckage told an even more horrifying story. Investigators found evidence of at least 6 different types of lithium batteries that had undergone thermal runaway, each producing its own unique cocktail of toxic gases. The concentration of hydrogen fluoride in the cockpit area was sufficient to cause immediate respiratory damage and chemical burns. Captain Lampe and First Officer Bell weren't just flying through smoke. They were breathing a chemical weapon that was slowly destroying their lung tissue with every breath. At 7:28 p.m., 3 minutes before impact, the flight data recorder captured something that still gives investigators nightmares. The aircraft's center of gravity suddenly shifted as the cargo hold floor collapsed, causing a massive redistribution of weight that made the aircraft nearly uncontrollable. Captain Lampe's final struggle wasn't just against fire and smoke, it was against basic physics. The MD-11 had become aerodynamically unstable, and no amount of pilot skill could compensate for the fundamental changes in the aircraft's weight distribution. The NTSB's final report, released years later, contained a finding that sent shockwaves through the aviation industry. The investigators concluded that UPS Flight 2976 was not an isolated incident, but rather the inevitable result of systemic regulatory failures that had been building for over a decade. They identified at least 17 other incidents involving lithium battery fires on cargo aircraft that had been misclassified, underreported, or deliberately concealed by airlines and shipping companies afraid of increased regulation and oversight. Perhaps most damning of all, the investigation revealed that the Federal Aviation Administration had been aware of the growing risks associated with lithium battery shipments since 2006, but had consistently delayed implementing stronger safety measures due to pressure from industry lobbying groups. Internal FAA memos obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests showed that agency officials knew that existing fire suppression systems were inadequate for chemical fires, but were reluctant to mandate expensive upgrades that would impact airline profitability. The final moments of Flight 2976 weren't just a tragedy, they were a crime scene. At exactly 7:31 p.m. Gulf Standard Time, UPS Flight 2976 impacted the desert floor at 400 miles per hour, instantly killing Captain Doug Lampe and First Officer Matthew Bell. But their deaths marked the beginning, not the end, of this story. The fireball that consumed N-571 up in the Arabian desert would ignite a revolution in aviation safety that continues to this day. The immediate aftermath of the crash revealed the true scope of the cover-up that had enabled this tragedy. Within hours of the accident, UPS executives were on conference calls with lithium battery manufacturers, shipping companies, and regulatory officials. Internal emails later obtained by investigators show a coordinated effort to control the narrative, minimize liability, and prevent the release of information that would expose the systemic failures that had killed 2 pilots and destroyed a $100 million aircraft. But Captain Lampe and First Officer Bell had left behind something that no corporate damage control could eliminate. 18 minutes of black box recordings that told the complete truth about what had happened in their final moments. Every word, every alarm, every sound of their aircraft disintegrating around them was preserved in digital memory that would eventually expose every lie, every cover-up, and every regulatory failure that had led to their deaths. The investigation that followed became one of the most comprehensive and controversial in aviation history. NTSB investigators, working alongside international teams from Germany, the UAE, and other countries, painstakingly reconstructed not just the accident itself, but the entire supply chain that had created the deadly cargo load. They traced individual battery shipments back to their origins, identified specific regulatory violations, and documented a pattern of systematic safety circumvention that spanned multiple countries and dozens of companies. The human cost of these failures extends far beyond the 2 lives lost that September night. Captain Lampe left behind a wife and 2 teenage children who had to watch news reports speculate about pilot error and mechanical failure, while knowing their husband and father had died fighting an impossible battle against corporate negligence. First Officer Bell's family endured years of legal proceedings as airlines, and manufacturers tried to shift blame onto the dead pilots who couldn't defend themselves. The technical revelations from the investigation fundamentally changed aviation safety protocols worldwide. New regulations now limit the quantity of lithium batteries that can be carried on a single aircraft, require enhanced fire suppression systems specifically designed for chemical fires, and mandate improved training for pilots dealing with toxic smoke emergencies. Cargo loading procedures have been completely overhauled, with mandatory separation of dangerous goods and real-time monitoring of cargo hold conditions. But perhaps the most significant change has been in transparency and accountability. The regulatory agencies that had ignored warning signs for years were forced to acknowledge their failures publicly. The FAA implemented new whistleblower protections for employees who report safety concerns and established independent oversight boards that can investigate potential conflicts of interest between regulatory officials and industry lobbyists. The shipping companies and battery manufacturers who had systematically violated safety regulations faced criminal charges in multiple countries, with several executives receiving prison sentences for their roles in the tragedy. More importantly, the financial penalties imposed were severe enough to make safety compliance more profitable than continued violations. When corners are cut in aviation, people die. And finally, there were consequences that reflected that reality. For Captain Doug Lampe and First Officer Matthew Bell, these changes came too late. But their sacrifice wasn't in vain. Every cargo aircraft flying today carries improved fire suppression equipment because of what happened to Flight 2976. Every lithium battery shipment is now subject to enhanced scrutiny because 2 pilots died trying to save an aircraft that should never have been carrying such a dangerous load. Every regulatory official now knows that ignoring safety warnings can result in criminal liability, not just administrative consequences. The story of UPS Flight 2976 is ultimately about more than aviation safety. It's about corporate responsibility, regulatory integrity, and the price of putting profits ahead of human lives. It's about 2 experienced pilots who fought until their final moments to prevent an even greater tragedy, and whose courage in those last 18 minutes saved countless lives on the ground. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how the systems designed to protect us can fail, and how the sacrifice of heroes like Captain Lampe and First Officer Bell continues to make flying safer for everyone. The next time you board an aircraft or ship a package, remember that the safety measures protecting you were written in the blood of pilots who died so that others might live. In the end, Captain Doug Lampe and First Officer Matthew Bell got exactly what they were trying for in those final moments over the Arabian desert. They saved lives, they just couldn't save their own.